everyone. Welcome to the Raising Consciousness Now webinar with John Freeman today. I'm your host, Veronica Tracy Smith, and I'm very excited to have my friend John here talk about relationships beyond judgment. John is an amazing man. He is a spiritual intelligence coach, which is where I met him. He is a coach and works with people from an integral standpoint, and he'll talk to you more about that. And John is a leader, and he trains people in leadership, organizational development, and he is working a lot with relationships. So that is the focus today. And John, welcome today. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you, Veronica. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, so I am going to let you take over, and I know that working in relationships has been kind of an ongoing thing for you, and I know you have more to say about that, so I'm going to just turn it over to you. And during the webinar, let me say this, that if you are on the website only and you're going through your website, you want to make sure that you have your audio synced up with web only and the listen only, and I will be fielding the questions both on the call and also in the website. So if you want to type in your questions, if you are, I know a lot of people said they're going to be listening to the recording, and I had people from all over Europe and the United States, and people asking, is there going to be a recording? Yes, we'll have a recording. So if you want to listen to this again, if you're on today, but please type in your questions if you're on the webcast only, and I will be fielding those as we go along, and John will let me know when we're going to have some questions. So if you're on the phone line, I'm going to put everyone on mute while John talks to us, and then I can unmute us all as we go along. So enjoy the webinar, and John, take it away.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I hope there will be questions because my preferred style is interactive. I have plenty that I will say if there aren't any questions, and it's going to run according to a sort of a vague plan, which is I'll talk about me a bit and my background and what relates from my experience to the reason that I've ended up doing relationships coaching and the presentation of this kind. I was hoping that I might be able to find something about who's on the call, but I realize this particular technology doesn't have a polling system, so I can't ask you questions about you. But I might throw them out into the field anyway, just for my own benefit and to see what I pick up from that, because I do aspire to working intuitively and with the field, and you'll hear more about that as I talk as well. And so the plan will certainly include me talking about why I used a title for this webinar, Relationships Beyond Judgment. What does that mean, and what are the things that are kind of the keys to what I'd like to present as an approach to relationships, which I'd like to think might be refreshing to many people. It's not conventional, which tends to be typical of me too. And then if there is anything coming up by way of questions, I certainly would like to do some what's up, responding to the field, and I'll close with talking about what else is available after this particular webinar. So, on to the bit that's about me, which is a brief story, particularly of me with regard to relationships. I don't want to give you my entire biography. I think that would not be hugely interesting, and besides which, if you really want that and haven't seen it already, there's lots of stuff on the Raising Consciousness Now website which gives an idea of that background information. So my history with relationships, if anything qualifies people to teach, it tends to be how much they've failed themselves in the past and how hard they've had to work to get themselves together. That's where a lot of the learning curve comes, and where you earn the right to know what it's like to go through the difficult bits and come out the other side. And the story of my relationships, there's a kind of geeky-looking guy on the slide. That's not me, but it's not too dissimilar to who I was. Certainly as a teenager and a young man, I had very low self-esteem in regard to relationships, not necessarily overall. I had maybe excessive self-esteem in some other areas, but I was not good with girls or women as time went on. I got myself into a first marriage which was toxic and destructive, a very difficult, very troubled human being. I went in with the illusion that you can change people, which is something that some of you may have encountered is not a good idea. If you don't actually really like people the way they are, then don't go into a relationship. I mean, they may get better, but certainly with relationships, you can't assume that people will fundamentally change, and that's fairly big mistake. I'm hearing some background noise. Okay, seems to have stopped. So that first marriage, I kind of came out of it after several years when I'd done some personal growth work, which at least got me to the point where my self-esteem was sufficient to realize that I deserved rather better than this, and that this wasn't working for anybody. And so I came out of the marriage, and I went through a period where I continued to do personal development, and I did a lot of that, which was very specifically around the area of the relationships. And I worked with something called the Loving Relationships training. This is quite a while ago now. I had a few relationships in that period which kind of were gradual signs of improvement, I suppose you might say. They worked better and they worked for longer. And then I finally got to the point where I was capable of attracting and making a relationship with a partner who I went into my second marriage, and that lasted for 25 years, and that was really good. We were very productive together. We managed to bring up my son from the first marriage and a son that we had, and they are the two gentlemen in the other picture that's on the slide, where the younger one is best man at the wedding of the older one. And yeah, in that relationship there was a lot of continued growth, and that went on until, in fact, last year, when some things happened that I won't talk about in detail, but which resulted in my now former partner deciding that her future was much more exciting with somebody else, who happened also to be female, and with whom I now share a house, along with a fourth person who is my new partner. And I won't say much more about what that's like, but I wanted to say enough about it to indicate that it is possible to come out of a relationship even when the change is unexpected and even initially painful, which of course it was, but to come out the other side of that with some grace, and the relationship in a different form, but nevertheless intact as a relationship. And so that's where my life is now. The questions, I mean, it would be really nice to know who's listening and how many are male and female, and if there are any people who are who would consider themselves bisexual or confirmed gay, I have certainly no difficulty, as you'll understand with the recent history. If I'd had any difficulty, I'd have had to get over it. But I don't claim any expertise. I can only talk about people. I'm going to assume anything I say has some possibility of relating to gay people in relationship, but you'll have to do your own translation when I talk about men and women into the appropriate combinations for you. I'm hoping even there might be some people on the call who are themselves in a partnership and who may even be attending together and sharing the listening to this call. And perhaps there are some people on the call who will want to know more about what does it take if you want to have a partnership and you haven't currently got one. And for me, the answers that apply in this area, or the approaches that apply in this area, are pretty much the same whether you want to improve a relationship, whether you want to start one, or even whether you're looking to make a transition from one that isn't working and to do that gracefully. So the last point on this slide says, if you could ask just one question today, what would that be? And so even if you're not in the position to type that in, I'd just like you to hold that question in your mind. Just have a sense of what is the biggest thing, the main thing that I would be looking to get out of this webinar or out of any work that I do on relationships. So what's the approach? What is it that you need in order for your relationships to become more and more successful? And the answer isn't about becoming someone else. It isn't about changing something in your life so that you're not who you truly are. It's about you becoming more of who you truly are and finding what it takes to be fully present, to stand in that, to have confidence in that, to be able to receive all of who you are. Because when you can receive all of who you are, then you start to be in a position to receive what might be able to come to you from the universe. This webinar, I imagine that many people, most people who are connecting into it have come to it through Raising Consciousness Now, and at the core of everything that I'm saying is consciousness, or I would also call it awareness, being aware of who you are. And that when you become more aware, the more that you open up to receive everything of you and everything that the universe has, without being in judgment, without closing down to what is present in the universe, what is present in your field, what is present in your life and around you, the more that you're able to receive everything, whether it seems to you to be comfortable or not, but to allow it to be, you open up the field of energy coming towards you, and out of that comes everything that might potentially be possible for you. Now that's, for many of us, that's not how we've been brought up to think, it's not how we're encouraged to think, it's not what the world tells us, and it might sound quite a foreign idea. But one way to visualize it is as if when you create judgments, whether about yourself or about other people or about things in the universe, you start to build an energetic wall around yourself. And that energetic wall not only begins to stop the things that you think you're choosing not to have to come to you, it becomes a wall to everything energetic. It actually becomes, if you're looking at it from a consciousness standpoint, it becomes a form of disconnection from unity. It becomes a form of separation from oneness, so that you're no longer fully in a position to engage with everything that oneness has to offer. Now, none of that means that you're going to have to put up with things that you would choose not to put up with. You still have a choice of where you are, how you live, who you're with, and what you accept physically in your life. But when you start to receive the energy, and if it's not what you want, you allow it to flow through you and out and kind of out the other side so that you're not putting up barriers, then your openness to the universe as a whole changes. And with that attitude towards receiving, you then become capable of receiving the partner or the relationship that actually is for you, not the one that you've got in your head. And we'll talk some more about what people tend to have in their minds as to what a relationship is going to look like, or as to what the ideal partner will look like, or the concept you might have of soulmate and how that will come to you and what the quality of that will be. All of those judgments can become barriers to you engaging with what actually is and generating what is truly possible for you and becoming all of who you can truly be. So that's quite deep, possibly a little confronting for some belief systems. So I'd like you, if possible, to just receive that and open your mind to it as a possibility, and see where that might take us as I go into the next element of how I'm going to present the approach that I'm bringing, which is around living in the question. Because the second thing that we learn to do and are expected to do, and we think is the way to make life work, is that we think we have to find answers. And fundamentally, answers are not helpful to you. Choices are helpful to you. In any moment you may make a choice, and that's in one sense that's a temporary answer, but it's not an answer for all time. And a lot of people are used to thinking, okay, I'm going to figure out how things are, and I'm going to know the answers, and then I will be able to control my life and manage it, and I will know what to do. And there's a sense of security that comes with that we're taught to have about knowing how to know the answers and to know what the right thing is to do. And we live in the goods and the bads and the rights and the wrongs of that. But in fact, that is also what takes us into judgment of what's going to be good for us and what's not, that causes us to filter the energy and block the energy. And so that goes back into the receiving question. But when you start to live in the question, what's possible now? What energy can I be that will bring the best to me? What awareness could I have at this moment that would allow me to function at my best in this moment? Those kinds of open-ended questions start to change the way that life can work, because it allows the universe to engage with you from a point of view of a kind of dialogue. And whether the universe is the universe of your partner or the universe in its biggest sense, either way, living in the question starts to open up something new as a possibility for you. So a lot of what happens in the answers is stuff that other people have told us about how we should be. So it's not only the answers we've formed about this is what the world looks like, or this is what a good relationship will look like, or this is what my ideal partner will look like. It's also about what's right and wrong or good and bad about you. And everyone who's ever done any work on themselves knows about self-talk. They know about the places where any of us can get into thinking that I'm wrong, I'm bad, I have a judgment about how I handled that situation, and I can't move on from it because I've decided that I'm a bad or incompetent person. I've decided that there are aspects of me that are not fully fit to have a perfect relationship, but maybe if I keep really quiet about those and just pretend that they're only my belief system and I don't tell the other person how I'm feeling, they won't notice. And so they will be able to live with me as I am in that concealment. And the truth is, we are all much more intuitive and much more psychic than we generally think ourselves to be, and that what you think about yourself is a projection out into the field that other people will pick up on. And so that too becomes an inhibition to what you will allow in your life. And actually, there was never anything wrong with you in the first place. There is nothing wrong with you now, and all there is the possibility that you will open up more of who you are day by day, minute by minute. And anything that I say here and anything that I do at any time in interaction with people, that would be my desire, is that anybody will feel that all that faces them is the possibility of more. And anything that has been, quotes, unsatisfactory in the past is just something to know about, to discover about oneself, to move on from, to transform, and to be in a process of continuous, increasing self-awareness that doesn't require any judgment. It doesn't require any treating oneself or anybody else as being right or wrong. It means discovering more, transforming the choices that don't feel like they've worked into choices that feel better, awakening to oneself, and more integrating all of that process. And you'll very likely have been engaging in that pathway in many ways. So many of us have done the discover piece, which is about delving into our past and unlocking the things that we may have wanted to move on from, and becoming more aware of that. And I certainly would say that I've spent many years living in the process of undoing my past in order to get where I am. I think the quicker we can do that, the better, because the more we can get into the opening of clarity where we can see the new and begin to transform and implement the new and awaken to the more of who we are, then the better life gets. But that's maybe a continuous process in which the balance of the kind of the discovery, the transformation, the awakening and the integration is gradually changing, so that it moves, if you see those 4 steps as being a movement from the past into fully present and kind of engagement with creation of the future, that pathway, the proportions are gradually changing as one does more and more work, to the point where we get more awakened, more aware and more integrated, and we can be everything that we aspire to be in the world and everything that we're capable of being in the world. And so all of that is about losing the limitations that we've imposed on ourselves, or the limitations that we've accepted from other people, because the voices that we have had in our heads, or may still have in our heads, many of those are other people's voices and other people's opinions that actually are of no value to us whatsoever. And the quicker we lose them, the better. And all of that process leads to ending the judgment of yourself and the judgment of others, so that you can receive all of life and all of love and all of relationship with ease. And although I'm presenting all of this in the context of relationship, it's actually all the same stuff that I've just said is also the key to prosperity. Because when you're able to receive yourself and when you're able to receive the universe, you open up the possibility of flow in a much bigger way than it's ever been before. So, in relationship, you can take a look at what is your judgment. What's the judgment that you make of yourself? What's the judgment that you make of your partner? What are the you could spend quite a lot of time looking at the opinions that you hold, the points of view that you live in and with, that are actually past decisions that you have made about what's good and bad or right and wrong, that perhaps if you were able to loosen those, would open you to see less of the polarities of right and wrong and more of the integration of, well, sometimes this is good and sometimes it's not good. And I can be in choice more of the time about what's going to work for me in this minute and what's going to work for me in the next minute, and to be able to let go of a choice that you made and have it be flexible on a continuous basis. And to do that in relation to yourself and in relation to your partner opens up a space of possibility that you can both together enter into a continuous process of transformation and possibility. All of this is about increasing the range of what is possible for you. So, what would it take for you to accept yourself 100%? That's not just a question to your mind, that's also a question into the unconscious and into the field of the universe and into the big mind and into the whole of the relationship with creation. It's a question that if you hold it lightly and don't actually look for the answers, but just allow the question to be there, that you create a space where the answers will come to you, where more will open up, that will allow you to be what would be the result of that question, which is a choice, a shift, a change. What would it take for you to accept yourself 100%? This is where I'm encouraging the living in the question. What would it take for you to be 100% free from guilt and shame and any of the other self-judgments that you may carry around with you, and any of the judgments that you have which may lead to something which is less than complete valuing of who you are as a unique human being, as somebody who is a fully connected, conscious, infinite being in an infinite universe where nothing is limited in terms of what that connection could reveal. Most of us carry around a set of perceptions about what universe is that makes us think that the views that we have of what it is to be human right now are the same views that we might have in 10 years, 20 years, or 50 years. That there is no greater beingness for human beings than that which we currently know. And what I'm suggesting, offering to you as a possibility, is that we have no idea, that we've only scratched the surface of what humans are capable of being and what we individually and collectively are capable of being, because we've been living in a particular view of reality which has closed off a huge amount of what is possible for us. So how do you feel about being seen in everything that you are? What would it take for you to be comfortable having yourself completely seen, completely visible? What would it be like if we were all able to stand in our nakedness and vulnerability and openness, and in a field of loving acceptance for everything that is? What kind of life does that make possible? What kind of healing does that bring about for everybody who enters into that space? And what transformation can it bring to relationships? I'm going to pause for a second and let that just settle in. So I've just moved to a slide which starts with the statement, "I asked for a man who would sweep me off my feet. Then I found I was flat on my face." And that's an example of something that people might think about what love means that might not entirely work as you expect it to. So what does love mean to you that, if it didn't mean that, would set you free? What definitions have you set up for yourself about what love looks like, what intimacy would feel like, what a partner should be like, what your ideal form of relationship might be? What do all those things mean to you that, if they didn't mean that, would set you free to create something that would be even more abundant for you, that would bring even more possibility to you? There's a certain set of conventions that go around relationships. There's a lot of mythologies, there's a lot of belief systems, there are a lot of social norms, and if anything has been very clear in the last few decades, it's that those norms are being broken down. We've started to be much more accepting of the fairly obvious big parts of that, like, oh, it's possible to be gay and that to be acceptable. It's even possible for people not to be married, even though they've decided they love each other and want to live together and bring up children. They can do that without being married to each other. Well, that might not seem too big a deal now because we've got fairly used to it, but 20, 30 years ago that would have been a really big deal, and many of you have lived through that, and many of you have lived through what it was like to have a child outside of a marriage and how society regarded that. Well, those are just a few examples of places where things have been encoded in conventions and belief systems about what is right and wrong about love or sex or intimacy or relationship, which might not be true for you. What is true for you? And one of the ways you might know what feels true to you is when you examine a possibility, notice whether it makes you feel lighter in your body or heavier. And if it makes you feel heavier, then it's probably not a truth for you. So central to what I'm saying here is that there are very, 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 very few absolute truths. Most truths are personal. They're choices. What's true for you? It doesn't have to be what's true for me. What's true for you doesn't have to be true for your partner. You don't have to agree about everything. You don't have to agree about everything that might be true. And that's one of the belief systems that can actually be quite constricting in a partnership, in thinking that there's certain ways that you or they have to be. So I was kind of hoping at this point there might be some questions for us to play with, because although I've been doing all this talking, actually I would even like to suggest that our relationship with presentation and learning should change, because my job here isn't really for me to be the equivalent of a fire hose and for you to just suck it up. Actually, what I would like to be is a response to whatever is needed by you and in you, and for us to have an interaction in which something can emerge between us, which might even be something that is completely new and opening for me, because I don't have the view that I'm coming into this conversation with all the answers. So I'd really love it at this point if there's anybody who does have a question. And
yeah, John, Veronica here, back on. So anyone who wants to type in questions can. I know sometimes people, we've had quite a few webinars, people will just jump on and talk, and I've unmuted everyone. So if there's a question they want to bring in here, and then also a lot of times people will just want to type in the questions and I can read them, and there has been a question sitting here for a little while. And I'd also like to make some comments as well, John, if that's okay.
Oh, please.
You know, you're talking about really a more mature level of adult development in terms of sitting in the question, and I just love that. It's something I've been working with for the last few years, and that is also looking at where people are developmentally. And from an adult development place, you know, when we're teenagers and young adults, social connection is so important, and how we're seen by our peers is so important during that developmental stage. And I know you know all of this with spiral dynamics and the different stages that we need to go through and how we integrate those as we go through our developmental stages, especially in our adult life. And that used to not really be talked about. You know, it was kind of like we had a lot of developmental stages that we went through and tasked to achieve in early childhood, adolescence, and young adulthood. And then we were adults and we became we went through maybe a midlife crisis. That was the only other part that psychology really addressed. And then old age. And that was it in terms of the stages of development. And in the last 20 years, we've come a long way with starting to look. And now it's really filtering into a more practical way of looking at it. So we go through our social connectiveness in our late teens and our early adulthood, finding out who we are, and then developing more individuality. And that, when we're in that individuality, like really knowing the answer to the question is important. So we're only able to answer questions then that are at that developmental stage, where we can have questions that are more concrete, that show we know who we are, we're developing our individuality, I'm different than you, you're different than me. And there's real boundaries there. There's real borders there. There's disconnect that comes with that. There's expectations, like you're saying, in love, living in the question. And I just love that, because you're really talking about conscious living, and that conscious living is what is the question in the moment, and living in the question versus, hey, I had it figured out 10 minutes ago or yesterday. And living in that question takes us then to that next developmental stage of the unknowing. And that is where we really broaden our perspectives of ourselves, of everyone else, of the universe, of what we may call God or spirituality or nature, or something bigger than ourselves. It's opening it up to all of that being part of us. And I just love how you're opening that up by saying, how can we live in the question? And that opens up, would you say, awareness, discovery. We transform and awaken and integrate in that state. And, you know, with polarities, the unknowing, sitting within or dancing within two opposites, what are seemingly opposites, that we need to manage versus fix. So I'm just loving how you're integrating all of this into love, into relationships, and in all kinds of relationships. And it makes those boundaries much more permeable. It makes us much more permeable. And for myself personally, there's been so much more of a freedom and a surrender. And, you know, that's my contemplative word when I'm sitting, is surrender. And surrender, the longer that I've sat with that, the more it opens up to surrendering to so much more, even in the moments. And that's, am I getting what you're saying? Is that integrating kind of what you're talking about?
Very much so, and I love the way you're expressing it, kind of differently and in a way which is completely compatible, because the shift that you're talking about, yes, of course, all of us have been through those stages, and it's about in many cases just realizing, oh, actually there is something more that we might be able to do than we've known that we could do before. And so in some ways, you know, yes, I know that there may be occasionally some people who find the approach that I'm putting forward challenging, but actually I hope that more people will find, oh, okay, it could be that way. What if it was like that? What could we be if we opened up into that space in place of the space that we've been while we've been going through all those developmental stages? You know, what's the possible human here?
Mm-hmm. Right. And you're really, when you sit in the openness of the question versus the answer, you're opening yourself up to maturing your developmental stages much more quickly. And I did want to address those developmental stages because they're equally important. So if you are someone who's really developing your individuality right now, that is great, you know, to be really conscious of that and to experiment also with living in a question. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, and it's important for us to develop our individuality, because if we don't develop our individuality, our ego, we can't lose our ego, is the saying. And as Einstein says, we cannot solve a problem at the same level of consciousness that the problem was created, or, you know, the question was created. So that little shift can really help us in our developmental search and in our growth. And again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It's a dance between the two. And certainly as we're going from that individuality state of development where we know who we are and we know our values and we've developed them and we've worked hard on ourselves and we really kind of got who we are, as we shift into that state of unknowing, and maybe all your belief systems get shaken up, we go back and forth between those. It's that dance. It's that infinity loop, and as in polarity management and polarity thinking, it is being able to dance between those two. So it's not about being right or wrong, and I don't think at all that you're saying that, John. You're just really challenging us to live in the question, and especially the question about love. You know, some of your questions that you proposed to us, what would it take to accept yourself 100%, and not even answering the question, just living in that question, you know, for a week maybe, or a couple weeks, or maybe a month. Or I like to bring into my meditation practice a question, you know, so I have my word, surrender, and then what's the question, you know, where am I at, what's that question right now, and living in that for a while. So I love that openness and that challenge to all of us, really. And that's, you know, what raising consciousness is about for me, is how do I raise my own consciousness constantly and be more present in that moment.
Absolutely, and thank you for. In, I certainly didn't mean to imply that any of the previous stages actually were wrong in any way. Actually, some of the journey is about continually going back and completing things that may not have been complete or fully explored at those earlier stages, and it's definitely not an either or. It's perfectly okay to do all of those things. It's the position you do them from shifts. When you enter into the notion of possibility and openness, then all of those things are simply available to you and part of your toolkit and part of the choices that you have available to you, and that is the very thing for me which takes any of them out of the right or wrong. It takes them into a place of exploration.
Right,
And
yeah.
expansion.
Right.
So yes, thank you for that. And yes, I'm presenting. This is typical for me when I bring something forward. I tend to bring a very big picture, and I tend to land rather a lot all at once. I don't expect that anybody is going to be able to take any of these things that I'm saying and instantly do it. I certainly didn't. It's an ongoing journey for me. And so the notion that you might take just one question and sit with it for a week or 2 weeks and see what that does in your relationship with the universe, well, absolutely. That may be absolutely the best thing that somebody can do. It's the beginning of building a different sense of who we are and who we can be, a more expanded sense of who we can be, and it happens bit by bit. I'm very grateful for all that I've been able to do that has got me to where I am now, and it's taken me years.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to suggest that you were saying it was bad or wrong to be in those other places. I just was putting some context around from I'm a psychologist, so from a developmental stage point of view, and how important it is you're giving us tools really to access more of this unknown place, and this place that hasn't been written about a whole lot. It certainly is being written about more from the integral community, and polarity thinking brings some of that in there as well.
Mm-hmm.
And psychology is addressing it, and just starting to develop the tools to access that place. So people go into that, and I think when we go into a place that's dark without tools or light, even a tool of having a flashlight, we can still go through it. It just takes longer. And by having more tools and understanding the context and the geography and the terrain we're going through, it helps us to say yes to it, for me anyway, a lot easier, and to create more of a holding place, like, oh, well, other people have gone here, and some people did it in the dark, and now we're developing more tools, and we're saying, oh, this is the terrain of this developmental stage. It is about sitting in the unknowing. It's about sitting in the question, and sitting in the question is actually a tool that helps us sit in that unknowing with, maybe a little less fear, knowing that other people are going through this. So that's the context I was trying to bring to it in such a beautiful way that you brought that. So let's bring some other people in here. We've had people on the phone from Italy. We have Yolanda. Hi, Yolanda. I was also putting a notice on Facebook as well, and Yolanda's listening with us, and we connected on Facebook. So she's on the webinar and not on the telephone, and she asked earlier, how does working on raising one's spiritual intelligence help in relationship building? You want to take that question, John?
I'm very happy to take that question. And I'm sure you would have a few things to say about that yourself.
It's all yours.
Spiritual intelligence, particularly working in Cindy Wigglesworth's context in the SQ21, is really about widening the bandwidth of the number of things that one can be aware of about oneself and about one's relationship with the world, with the universe, with others. That we start to explore the many different facets of all of those things, both in the sense of our own internal reality and in what's there in the outer world, and how we view the outer world. So it's among the best toolkits that are available to us right now for seeing ourselves with greater clarity, and seeing what maybe is the next question that we would want to ask about ourselves, or about what's the next question that we would want to sit in, what's the next area that we would most want to explore, because particularly the spiritual intelligence assessment process allows one to see very clearly maybe where the gaps are, and to say, okay, yeah, I think that's the one I'm going to get most out of working with. And so it's a lovely basis for a coaching conversation, and it's always a pleasure to be working with that.
Great, yeah. If there's any more parts to that question or any other questions, please let us know. I know it does take a moment or two for the typed-in questions to come through, so I hit the refresh button often. And is there anyone else on the phone that would like to ask any questions? Can leave that open there. Okay, well, I don't see or hear any more questions. So, I would really say with the question on raising one's spiritual intelligence and helping in relationship building, I know it certainly has helped in my life. And as a therapist, a lot of what I do with couples is teach them like intentional dialogue and ways to communicate that are really opening up communication. And also teaching about the different parts of ourself, including, the parent, adult, and child, and the critic. And the critic is really important to look at, because we use that critical self on our own self, and we use it on other people without even realizing it. And to the degree that we are bringing our critic into a relationship, even with ourselves, it usually says a lot more about how uncompassionate we are with ourselves. And the more that we develop our compassion for ourselves, nurturing ourselves, saying no to the voice of the critic, and begin witnessing. So, I teach about going from the witness self from the ego self into the witness, and just watching what happens. That's kind of like sitting in the question, as you're talking about, John, is sitting in just from a viewpoint without judgment, is watching what's going on. And that, to me, and Debbie Della Cuesta, who's also my best friend and on Raising Consciousness now, she is one of the people who helped develop Raising Consciousness, and we teach, like, that's the bridge to go into your higher self. And when we come from a place of our higher self, and even in a split second, I can take a deep breath and say, wow, I'm irritated right now with something that my husband did maybe, and surrendering to that moment and knowing I don't have to take care of it or fix it. And also, how can I come from my higher self? Sometimes, I think Wayne Dyer says, by not saying something, you're creating a miracle. So by leaving my critical ego self out of it, I'm creating a miracle. But also witnessing, wow, just noticing, like for me in my body, I notice when my ego gets triggered that there's a certain place in my body that I react. And for me, that's kind of my upper stomach area that I'll have a reaction there. And so I've really, really worked, and this has taken, like working on this for quite a few years to notice ego reaction is that reaction in my gut right there. And as I realize that, I go ego. And then, just saying that and just witnessing it with no judgment has created miracles inside of me and helped me surrender to things that I don't need to do, and helps me really maintain a lot more physical energy too, as well, physical, emotional, spiritual energy, just to surrender, let things go. And then can I come from my higher self, my best self, the person that I know myself to really be, my true essence, in terms of coming with more compassion. Well, when I practice more compassion with myself and recognizing my ego without judgment or shame or guilt, then I can really come from my higher self much more purely instead of just kind of forcing it. So that, with my relationship with myself, has really altered things, and especially with the people in my life. I think that people feel much more unconditional, compassionate, caring, and love. And it doesn't mean that you have to be a wimp either. It means like, oh, no, I can say with compassion, no, you can't step over that boundary, or no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't need your help. Thank you so much for asking. When I do need your help, I'll ask. It's amazing transformation. And for my husband as well, for him, because he gets it too. I mean, he learns all this stuff along with me, and noticing, I think we've been really over-givers and that through the years, and it just really transforms the relationship, even for ourselves, and what we need to do and what we don't need to do, and what's ours to do and what's ours not to do, which is another amazing question. What's mine to do and what's mine not to do? Another amazing question to sit in.
Absolutely. I think everything you're saying, the core for me is that, yes, we've had the critic, and we need that healthy place, but the more it moves from criticism into awareness, which I think is what you're also saying with the witness place, mm-hmm. that we move it into awareness and choice rather than criticism and judgment.
Right.
And the mechanism can look quite similar, but actually the place of being that's in it, and where the way that your energy flows, that I think you're describing, is quite different, because it unlocks. There's more of your energy actually available to be. There's less that goes tight in the body. There's less that goes tight in the mind, and there's more openness for the possibility of what can happen in that space. There's more presence. I think what I like to see happening from that awareness in myself is an increase in presence and ability to be, and presence is a compassionate space. So I may be saying things in a different language, but it's very much part of that same context, that the more that we get out, why did I choose to say relationships beyond judgment? This is really the core of it. It's because we get out of the place of locking things down in the right and wrong, and into the awareness and the witnessing of, what is this? How does it feel? Do we want to change it? Do we not want to change it? But without getting locked into all the emotionality that most of us have carried with us, been trained with. Most of us have had that experience with our parents, because that's been the way that life is supposed to be lived. It's supposed to be that we expect that's what parents will do. And one of the transformations around parenting is taking into the space of being able to be loving, to be able to draw boundaries, but without being without telling children that they're bad. Just
right.
say that wasn't what I wanted. That wasn't a healthy choice. That wasn't a choice that was good for you right there. All of those things, but without making the person. It's you can go all the way back to Christianity for this, because it's actually the ability to be with and love the sinner without loving the sin. But you do it from a place of awareness rather than judgment, and it's it's the difference between the Christian approach and the punitive God of Moses era. It's a transition into a place where we're okay to be who we are, and we can improve.
Right. Well, we have a few more questions, and we're also running out of time, so I want to be mindful of that. Heidi and Mark from Rome says, isn't it, first of all, important to develop emotional intelligence, also for relationships, not first of all for our own development? Yes, definitely, and we did skip right into spiritual intelligence because that was the question there. But certainly, helping people develop the self-awareness. And I think John has talked about that, developing your own awareness of your own emotions and then awareness of other people's emotions and the ability to deal with your stress and stressful times and how you come across, and then also how you respond to people and the relationships that you work with. Yeah, definitely. Did you want to respond to that one?
Yes to all of that. The awareness, the more one increases awareness, the more that emotional intelligence, alongside the spiritual intelligence, is part of that picture. That we step out of the fear and the anger and all of the stuff that's part of the old way. It's all part of that same picture. So yes, emotional intelligence is an essential, and it's a consequence of working the way that I'm suggesting to work.
Yeah. Okay. And then Yolanda asks, what do you suggest to direct young females, 20 to 25, who are troubled in relationships and don't seem to get that they are a part of the problem?
Oh, that's a big question. These are. I think my feeling is that it's an individual conversation. Ideally, it's not something that you can prescribe, but it does start with there's a chat show host. Is it Dr. Phil who says, "How's that working for you?"
I don't know, but I think so. Somebody like that. Yeah, it's a great question.
Somebody like that. It's kind of, you keep on doing what you're doing, you're going to get the same outcomes. So at what point does anybody? This is an answer I think which applies to anybody who is in repetitive self-destructive or kind of non-constructive behavior. Is okay, what could you be doing differently? What is it that you're seeing as this is the way to work in the world? It does come back to things that you've decided are answers. This is the way that I should be in the world because I've decided, or I've been told that is the way for me to be in order to live life, and it's not working. So what are the decisions, the beliefs, the judgments, the computations, the viewpoints that I have developed that are actually leading me to things which give me the results I don't want? And what can I do to change that? And that any age, any gender, any context, that's a place to start.
Yeah, and I do think that we can teach these things in groups, and I would love to see more in the schools as well, and teaching emotional intelligence in the school, teaching communication skills, and I know there's more being done in my area as well on abusive relationships and what they look like and how to change some of those. So anyway, that is a great question, Yolanda. Thank you. And I just want to say thank you for everyone being present. John, is there anything you want to add before we complete this webinar today?
Well, I'd just like to kind of give a little overview of the other things that I do that might relate in case anybody's interested in any way of taking any of this further. So one of that is to say there's I have the plan to do more webinars and to go into many of the questions that I could only hint at in this conversation. So, what does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean to be a man? What do we expect? What's really unpacking that whole question about receiving? What does family patterns do to our relationships? There's, I've got 2 slides worth of questions and topics which I ideally not want to engage in just as a kind of presentation, but for them to come out as part of the conversations that answer the questions that would be coming forward in webinars. I'd like them to be very much alive and in the moment. So there is so much in these lists. You know, where are we with our bodies? Where are we with our senses? What are all the labels that we've put around sex and the different views of sex that we've had? And what maybe are the keys to success in relationships? And haven't talked about this list that looks like honouring ourselves and each other, trusting, allowance of each other, allowance of ourselves, living in vulnerability, and gratitude. I mean, I didn't talk about gratitude, but anybody who's on a spiritual path would hopefully know that gratitude is one of the things that's really important that we don't necessarily pay as much attention to as we might. So the webinars that I'm going to do, they will be capable of being booked online from www.relationshipscoach.net, and I'm also offering the ability to self-book coaching sessions for individual and for couples, in which if you're kind of inclined to go through this slightly more radical approach to how we might transform, I'd love to have people come and join me in that journey. And normally I would do that by Skype, but there are other possibilities if that doesn't work for people. I do a minimum of 3 sessions. There are no one-offs because I want people to kind of give themselves time to make a change, but for longer periods there are kind of discounting processes. And just to say that sessions don't have to be exclusively about relationships, because I'm interested in coaching people, not issues. So life coaching, leadership, parenting, prosperity, spiritual intelligence, that's all there, and that also can all be scheduled online. And lastly, something that will be on the PDF that will be available if you want to look at it. All the other things that I do or have done, particularly out of all the things that I've just put up on the slide, I've just published a book which I'm extremely excited about called The Science of Possibility, which goes into the nature of our relationship with the universe and the difference between the material and the non-material realities, and how our consciousness works with that is very, very fundamental and very potent in describing why I have brought the particular approach that I have today around possibility. Because it opens the science, I could almost have called it the science of infinite possibility. It opens up a creative space that is bigger than probably any that most of us will have ever engaged with. So that's a big excitement. At some point I will also start doing more around what I've called there the spiral parenting, the 7 stages of parenting, which actually does talk about how to be a parent, managing those different stages of development that you, Veronica, were talking about, and how we need to become different parents in order to support our children best as they go through those different stages. So that's work I'm also very excited by. There's lots of stuff there if people are interested. I won't go on about it at length, and there are places where you can get in touch with me. All those websites, if you do John at any of those websites, things will come through to me, and anybody who wants to get in touch, I'm very happy to hear from you.
Yeah, and also on our website, Raising Consciousness Now, you're a contributor and you're there, and that's really great. Well, thank you so much for being with us today, John. I really appreciate it. This is John Freeman and Veronica Tracy Smith, and this is all on Raising Consciousness Now. We thank you for being with us and hope you have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, everybody.
You're welcome.